So right now, Web3 is the biggest buzzword, right? Everybody is talking about Web3. But if you ask 5 different people what Web3 is exactly, you'll get about 7 different answers.
Hello. Welcome back to the Hue Seth Show. I'm your host, Hue Seth, and we have an exciting EP cooking up for you today with Bret Waters. He spent his entire life in Silicon Valley as an entrepreneur, CEO, investor, and academic. Today, his focus is helping other entrepreneurs and innovators succeed and thrive. He teaches entrepreneurship at Stanford and runs the Fourthly Startup Accelerator. Bret also coaches startup CEOs at Miller Center for Social Entrepreneurship and does a little angel investing. Previously, he founded and ran 3 Silicon Valley software companies, raising capital, building high-performing teams, creating innovative products, and managing successful exits. He also spent 6 years on the advisory board of the Stanford University Graduate School of Education, working to bring innovation to K-12 education, and serves as chief mentor with the European Innovation Academy, teaching Silicon Valley innovation methodology to engineering students from around the world. On today's EP, we discuss startups, tech, innovation, IoTs, and machine learning. Now, before we dive in, please hit the bell, give us a subscribe and a like, and I hope you enjoy. All right, Bret, so you previously founded and ran 3 Silicon Valley software companies, raising capital, building high-performing teams, creating innovative products, and managing successful exits. Now, you help other entrepreneurs and innovators succeed and thrive. I suppose I'm interested to hear more about your Startup Accelerator, Fourthly, and how did that name come about?
Yeah, thanks, Hugh. So I've been in Silicon Valley my entire life, and so I've lived the serial entrepreneur dream. I sold my most recent company a couple of years ago and decided that I would kind of focus the rest of my career on just helping other entrepreneurs to thrive and succeed. And I've taught entrepreneurship at Stanford University for I think about 10 years. I also work with the Startup Accelerator program that focuses on social ventures called the Miller Center for Social Entrepreneurship. And so I decided that as part of this new phase in my life that I would found a new Startup Accelerator program of my own, and that it would be kind of a global Startup Accelerator program. In other words, not just Silicon Valley. And I chose the name Fourthly because the World Economic Forum says that we're now entering the 4th industrial revolution. So the first industrial revolution was around the steam engine, the cotton gin, and was very much around London. The second industrial revolution was around electricity and mass production, and that was centered in the major mass production areas, Detroit in the US, Milan in Europe, etc. The third industrial revolution was computers, the IT, the internet, and obviously very much focused around Silicon Valley, and that's where I spent my entire career. And the World Economic Forum says we're now entering the 4th industrial revolution, which is kind of the merging of the digital, the biological, and the cognitive meaning AI and machine learning and that stuff. And that one of the things that makes this new 4th industrial revolution distinct from the previous 3 is that it's not just happening in one place. It's happening all over the world. There are clusters of innovation, clusters of entrepreneurship, and clusters of capital all over the world today. And that makes it different from the previous 3. And so I figured I would name my Startup Accelerator program, my new Startup Accelerator program, after this notion that we're entering the 4th industrial revolution.
Right. So now, with that being said, you've basically touched up on, in a sense, globalization. Then, if we're talking about this accessibility of capital and information and all of that. Now, what are some things that you're bullish on when we're looking at this globalization, as far as advancing technology, but not just in the U.S.? How would that look in a place like Africa?
Sure. So Africa is a very interesting market, or I should say bunch of markets, because Africa's a very large continent, a whole
Yeah.
bunch of countries.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's always funny the way Americans refer to it as if it's just one country, right? And it's
Right.
not. It's
Right.
and East Africa in particular has kind of been out in front on in terms of innovation and entrepreneurship. In fact, kind of digital money as we know it today really came from Kenya in East Africa. The M-Pesa was kind of the first successful digital payment system. And of course, now there's hundreds of them. But it sprung from the fact that in East Africa, you had a lot of people who were unbanked or underbanked, but everybody had a mobile phone, right? And so there was this opportunity to create a payment system that where anybody with a mobile phone could walk into a store and buy something. And still today, kind of East Africa is out in front on that topic, right? In that, in this country, it's still hard to go into a 7-Eleven, buy a bag of chips and pay for it with your cell phone, whereas that's how everybody buys everything in East Africa. So, sorry, I got off onto a digression there about East Africa and digital money. But the point is that the continent of Africa provides all kinds of opportunity, and especially because it's probably a little behind the curve in terms of, there's the emerging market opportunity there, right? Whereas a lot of the markets in the U.S. are kind of saturated markets. So I think it's super interesting opportunities, and that one of the things that's distinct about this new world era, this fourth industrial revolution, is that there's been a decoupling of centers of capital and centers of innovation, right? It used to be, certainly through my career, if you wanted to create a startup, you had to be in Silicon Valley because this is where the capital was. But today, investors in Silicon Valley are investing in startups in Africa, or investing in startups in the Middle East, or investing in startups in Europe. Geography no longer matters in the same way that it once did.
Right. So now, with that being said, though, how do you see investors warming up to the idea of foreign investments? I know that investors are getting more and more accepting of that
Yeah.
investment strategy, but there's still this apprehension of going globally and investing there. How
For sure.
how do we make this thing more popular in the sense?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, of course, what an investor cares about is upside opportunity, right? I'm going to put in X amount of money, and there's lots of room for this startup to grow and thrive and succeed. And so, in the developing world, there's often a lot more upside, a lot more kind of opportunity for growth, right? Which is what an investor cares about. And then the other thing an investor cares about is that this money that I put in is going to, last long enough for the company to succeed. And operating expenses here in Silicon Valley these days are pretty damn high. And so, you put $1 million into a startup in Silicon Valley, that'll probably last them less than a year. Whereas you put $1 million into a startup somewhere else in the world, that same $1 million might last them 2 or 3 years. And give them more time to get traction, more time to develop customers, more time to develop innovative products, right? And so many investors here are kind of realizing that the opportunities in investing in companies out of Silicon Valley are frequently as compelling or more compelling than the opportunities to invest here.
So how can founders that are international, and let's say they're from third world countries, whatnot, how do they participate and actually get access to capital? I mean, the idea of, hey, you can get money to run your startup from foreign investors in the US, Europe, is obviously an attractive one. But now how probable is it now for founders that are in those third world countries?
Right. So the sad reality is you still need some sort of an advocate who can make introductions for you. In other words, for somebody with a startup in Africa to cold call a Silicon Valley venture firm, it's just not that likely to work. So, my recommendation is always, go to LinkedIn and hunt for somebody perhaps on LinkedIn, who knows somebody who could make an introduction for you. That the way this world works still means that you kind of need an introduction. The good news is that with tools like LinkedIn today, you can figure out connections you might have. And if you don't have any connections, then just reach out to somebody randomly and say, hey, would you mind having a call? I'm working on a new startup, and I'd love to just get some thoughts from you. And then you have a call with somebody who maybe they're in your space. Maybe you've got a fintech startup, and this is somebody you found on LinkedIn who has experience with financial services, and you have a call with them just to kind of get their thoughts. And then at the end of the call, you say, by the way, I'm looking to raise some investment money. Is there anybody you would suggest that I talk to? And you never know when you might get an introduction that way. So, the bad news is it's still a world where personal network matters. The good news is that there are ways today in which you can kind of work your personal network and find introductions. I should also say that, in a few minutes on Google, you probably can find some investors in the U.S. who focus on investments in Africa, or perhaps investment firms in the U.S. who have an office in Africa, or maybe they have a partner who kind of specializes in African investments. And so, finding a few minutes on Google, you can probably find some people to reach out to. And, these may not end up being people who invest, but they may well end up being people who can make introductions for you.
How can we expect globalization to impact employment, along with it? Should the average person fear AI coming in and taking their jobs, or are the jobs going to be replaced significantly by, are there going to be new categories of jobs coming into society from AI, right? And are they all related to software development and things like that? What skill sets would an individual also have to match this new world order that we're experiencing or about to experience?
Right. So, history indicates that every industrial revolution, every kind of major disruptive innovation does cause some job loss. But history also indicates that every single time more jobs are created than lost. So when the steam engine was invented, it eliminated a lot of labor jobs, right? A lot of people who did physical labor, those jobs disappeared because the steam engine could now do physical labor. But, the steam engine ended up creating far more jobs than it destroyed. So I think that's the good news. The good news is that history is pretty clear on this, that every wave of innovation ends up creating more jobs than it destroys. Now, that's of very little comfort to you if you're one of the ones whose job got destroyed.
Of course.
But as you said, the question really is just how does an individual prepare themselves for the next wave, for the next era? And certainly the high demand skills today are the digital skills, the full range of digital skills, from programming to interface design to data analysis, right? And certainly in Silicon Valley right now, there is more demand for those jobs than there are people. So if you have one of those skills, you are super, super high demand. The other piece of good news is that, remote work is, thanks to the pandemic, remote work is now here to stay. You may have seen that just last week, Airbnb announced that from now on, their employees would be able to live and work anywhere in the world. So this is a $5 billion company with 6,000 employees that is going to be 100% remote. You can live anywhere in the world and work for Airbnb. It's a pretty remarkable thing.
Oh, yeah.
And so, in terms of, people in remote parts of the world looking to improve their skills and looking to get a great job as part of the new fourth industrial revolution, The good news in terms of getting skills is that as long as you have an internet connection, you have access to all kinds of ways to learn the skills, right? You can watch a YouTube video on practically anything you want to learn. You can sign up for a wide variety of online courses. So there's lots of ways to get skills, from your dining room table these days. You don't have to travel away to university. And then once you have those skills, there's a whole bunch of places that are happy to hire you to work from your dining room table. You don't have to move, right? So, I think that while there are some job losses associated with this industrial revolution, as there always are, I think that net, it's great news for anybody looking for work today.
All right. So before we dive a little bit more into fourthly, I want to have us cover that into more details as to what exactly is done there, your programs and all of that good stuff. Before we dive into that, though, I think that, man, when I think about IoTs, AI, machine learning, and just all to come, Web 3.0, it makes me excited. But then there's that sense of nerve. What can we really expect? What are your thoughts on the intersection of all of these worlds, and how do they play a part in advancing society?
Right. So right now, Web3 is the biggest buzzword, right? Everybody is talking about Web3. But if you ask 5 different people what Web3 is exactly, you'll get about 7 different answers. So, to the crypto people, Web3 is all about cryptocurrency and blockchain and NFTs. To the privacy people, Web3 is all about getting away from Facebook and Google owning all of our personal data. To the creator economy people, Web3 is all about empowering the creator economy, and that all of a sudden artists and musicians and other producers will be able to distribute and monetize their work in powerful new ways. So, as I said, everybody seems to have a slightly different idea of what Web3 is all about. And I don't, I'm not really sure either in terms of, if you were to ask me to predict what the web looks like in 5 years, I don't really think I know for sure, but it definitely feels to me as if we are entering a new era online. That, I was around for Web 1.0, very kind of static websites, and I was around when Web 2.0 was being hyped. It's basically kind of the social and mobile era. And it definitely feels as if we're now entering something new. And it's some sort of intersection of crypto and blockchain and distributed apps and new ways of managing personal identity and AI and machine learning. It's definitely kind of at the intersection of those things somehow. So I'm curious, Hugh, you said it makes you nervous. So explain that a little further.
Well, the nerve part, obviously, if something is unknown, right? You're not sure what's to come from it. All of your life, you've been filled with sci-fi movies. And, no.
So you worried the bots are going to take over?
I'm just being facetious with that one, but I mean, ultimately, it's the unknown, right? We're diving into the unknown. Skills, am I developing the right skills, and all of these various things you start thinking about? Am I investing in the right areas? And especially someone like myself who's looking to get into VC, having a fund, and all of these things. I'm interested in what does the future look like, and when there's this uncertainties, and as I continue to do my studies, research, and communicating with those in the space, it's just that thing of nerve more than it is fear, but it's still there,
Yeah, I totally get it. And I guess my overall statement on this topic is that I think that there is more opportunity ahead for entrepreneurs and innovators and investors than ever before. That, I've been in Silicon Valley for my whole life, which is 60 some odd years now. So I've seen a lot of waves of opportunity.
You look like a youngin, man. You look young.
So thank you. Through my career, there was usually one wave of opportunity at a time. So first there was a semiconductor wave, and for 10 or 12 years it was all about semiconductor startups. And then there was the personal computer wave, and it was all about personal computer startups. And then it was the internet wave, and it was everything was .com, right? It was all about the internet. And then mobile social. And each one of those waves, as I said, kind of lasted 10 to 12 years. And then we were on to the next wave. Well, right now, today in 2022, there's like 4 or 5 or 6 salient waves going on at the same time, right? AI and machine learning, that's a whole opportunity wave of its own. Autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars, electric cars, right? That's a whole opportunity wave of its own. Medical technology, biotechnology, again, a whole wave of its own.
Nanotechnology.
Nanotechnology, exactly. So, I think that there is more opportunity ahead than ever before. I think it's a great time to be an entrepreneur. It's a great time to be an investor. There's been a democratization with regard to access to the tools required to be an entrepreneur, right? That everybody with a mobile phone today is connected to all the information available in the world today. That's pretty remarkable. And democratization with regard to access to capital, right? That it's not just about you have to know a venture capitalist on Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley. There are investors all over the world. There's crowdfunding. There's equity crowdfunding. There's, angel investors located in most of the major cities in the world today. And so there's been a tremendous democratization with regard to access to capital, access to knowledge, and access to the means of production, right? I mean, I remember, in 1999, I raised $5 billion for a new startup. We spent the first $1 million of that just buying servers, $1 million just to buy servers to get the startup off the ground, right?
Right.
Today, that's 10 minutes on AWS and about $12, and you've got that kind of server capacity up and running. It's remarkable. It's remarkable.
Bret, so these conversations are so unfair because there's a million questions I have to ask you, and oh my goodness. But to stay on point, I think we should just dive into fourthly, because I know you're a very busy man. You have a lot on your plate. So I really appreciate your time. But I want to know more about fourthly in details. How's fourthly helping entrepreneurs exactly? What sort of programs are there? How can entrepreneurs benefit from the fourthly ecosystem?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, Hugh. So there's kind of 2 differentiators to fourthly. There's a lot of Startup Accelerator programs out there, right? Lots and lots of Startup Accelerator programs. Y Combinator is the most famous one, but there's a whole bunch of other ones too. And there's kind of 2 distinct ways in which we are differentiated. The first is that because we are completely Zoom-based, we are a global Startup Accelerator. So in our last cohort, we had 2 startups from Turkey. We had a startup in Kenya. We had a startup in Nigeria. We had a startup in Mexico, 2 in Silicon Valley, 1 in Australia. And so the fact that we very much are positioned as a global Startup Accelerator program, and that because it's virtual, you don't have to fly into Silicon Valley for it. You can participate from 6 weeks from wherever you are and keep running your startup and keep taking care of your family, instead of having to take 6 weeks away from your startup and away from your family in order to come for a physical accelerator program. So that's the one way in which we're differentiated. The other way in which we're differentiated is that most Startup Accelerator programs charge some sort of equity. They take some sort of equity in your company. So Y Combinator takes 7% equity in your company in return for them investing a little bit of money and you participating in the program. And, we've been through a period where valuations for startups have been very, very high. So in Silicon Valley last year in 2021, the average seed stage valuation for a startup in Silicon Valley was a little over $10 million. So that means that if you give 7% of your company away to an accelerator program, that's equivalent to costing you $700,000, right? If you give them 7% and the company's worth $10 million, you just gave away $700,000. And so I feel as if in the current environment that, you as a startup founder, you worked hard for the equity you have in your company, and you should, not give it away to an accelerator. And so we structure fourthly as simply you pay to participate, and we take no equity. And that it's a much, much better deal for you as an entrepreneur than, giving away hundreds of thousands of dollars of equity in your program, in your startup. So those are the two principal ways in which we're differentiated. I think we're also, I've tried hard to put together a program, accelerator program, that is a combination of group time and kind of a set curriculum that everybody's doing together, combined with one-on-one coaching. So our 6-week program, there's 3 meetings a week with everybody in the cohort is meeting together. And we're talking about stuff, and we're kind of more or less following a set curriculum together. And then in addition to that, the startups in the program also have one-on-ones during the week with me, one-on-ones during the week with my CTO. So that's kind of our way of getting a blend of some one-on-one time and some group time. Because, what you need to work on, Hugh, may be different than what another startup in the program needs to work on, right? So anyway, that's the program, and it's only 2 years old, a little less than 2 years old. We've run 5 cohorts through so far. I limit it to just 10 startups per cohort. So we've had 50 startups go through it. And many of them have gone on to raise 7 figures in capital, and they're now thriving and building teams, solving problems, and creating opportunity all over the world.
Bret, it's been a pleasure having you on the Hue Seth Show today. Thank you for joining us.
I enjoyed every minute of it, Hugh, and I'd love to do it again. So let me know.
Thank you.